Before we begin, I want to thank all of you for joining me today. David White first approached me about doing a session for this Safety Coordinators Conference early last summer, and his sole desire was that I would help you all become more effective communicators, specifically public speakers. I am titling our session today Just the Facts, Ma'am, not just to emulate the famed Dragnet, but because I want us to remember that there is more to effective communication than just the transfer of information. As we go along today, we must remember the human factor and the necessity of working on those skills used in public speaking that can also be utilized when speaking to employees, supervisors, or clients. After the survey was returned, I was able to learn a little more about who you are, and we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But I wanted you to know a little about my communication journey. In 2008, I graduated from Cedarville University with a bachelor's in comprehensive communication. And soon after, I found myself in Louisville, Kentucky at Southern Seminary. While at Southern, I started an online master's in communication and leadership from Gonzaga to build upon my comprehensive communication degree from Cedarville. I was starting to understand the complexities of message transfer, but did not fully grasp the necessity of the conveyance of information until I started my PhD at Kentucky. At UK, I focus on instructional communication in the classroom, but several of my peers and professors have harnessed themselves to risk and crisis communication or health communication. We have an underlying message related to safety. How can we effectively tell others to evacuate in the case of a natural disaster, not to eat contaminated food, and instruct them on basic safety principles? I share all of this to relay that I understand as best I can the problems you face when it comes to communication of facts and processes that are safety related. In many ways, we have become immune to safety messages, so our task is to become more successful. Aside from working with KAEC, I have consulted with public finance resources and the Ohio Association of School Business Officials, and have taught countless public speaking courses at Kentucky, Bellarmine, and Cedarville. Now let's move to our survey results. Who are we? You know a little bit more about me and my journey, but let's look at who you are. We have over 20 years of experience. We are corporate safety administrators, compliance coordinators, risk managers with some public speaking experience. Yet there is one thing that brings all of us together, and that is safety. As we work through message effectiveness, I want you to take a minute and write down the messages you give on a routine basis. I know most of your vocational messages revolve around safety, but specifically, what do you try to communicate to others around you at work? After you have taken a minute, we will spend a moment discussing our primary audiences. Communicating effectively should be an audience, others-centric action. We should seek understanding and be willing to craft our message in such a way that our primary audience is most inclined to understand. You have just spent time writing down your primary messages. Now spend some time thinking through your primary audience. I have listed general topics on the screen, but be more specific in your analysis. Take 1 minute and think through who you communicate your primary messages with on a regular basis. Our survey results indicated that many of you speak most often to employees, clients, and supervisors. These categories will serve as our primary audience members. Think through what your audience needs and wants to hear from you in the message transfer process. What must they absolutely know? What is of the utmost importance? And what is just somewhat significant? Before looking at our specifics of message organization and delivery, it is imperative that we understand our primary message and primary audience. Without a clear understanding of who we are and who we are communicating with and what we are trying to communicate, our messages will fall on deaf ears. How many of you have flown recently? How many of you would truly understand what to do in the event of a crash? It is federal regulation that airline flight attendants offer safety regulations before every flight. Yet, how many in the airplane would understand exactly what to do in the case of an emergency landing? We live in a world now where flying is commonplace, yet the regulated message before a flight is a perfect example of a message that has gone through the motions. Airlines have tried to spice up their messages with jokes, anecdotes, and witty banter, but the question remains, has the audience understood the primary message? Our goal today is to look at our regularly given messages and attempt to become more effective communicators, rising above strict information transfer without sacrificing the most crucial information. Our agenda today is relatively simple. We will first look at the fundamentals of presenting clear and concise messages. You'll notice I didn't say public speaking. Then for those live at today's presentation, we will practice the messages that you brought to our session. And finally, we will discuss what we liked about our presentations and what are some improvements we can make. Before we begin with our fundamentals, I want to introduce you to a little bit of communication theory. In the 1940s, Claude Shannon and Warren Weaver developed a model for communication and message transfer. They believed that whatever problems exist, they can be solved by reducing information loss. Their information theory highlighted three elements: the source, the channel, and the receiver. The source sends a message through a medium while the receiver attempts to decode the message. While seeming simplistic, this is actually more difficult because our messages are disrupted by noise or anything that detracts from the message being fully understood. In theory, their premise wasn't miserable, but they sought solely the transfer of information. You, the message giver, are the source. And communication is linear as you attempt to clearly relay information. This is at least according to Weaver and Shannon. The problem is that humanity is not that simple. There are human elements and factors that we must deal with on a regular basis. What are some human factors that you have to work with when you are presenting a message to your employees, supervisors, or clients? We want to communicate our safety messages as effectively as possible, but boundaries exist. Take 1 minute to think about what potential elements may get in the way when you are trying to communicate with others on the job. You see, when we communicate, even if it is about safety, training, principles, methods, etc., it is not just information transfer. There are numerous things happening under the surface, and we must effectively communicate in spite of those. The flight attendant, prepping the patrons for an emergency landing, must articulate the message clearly before the landing is occurring, or the message will not be heard. They must speak over babies crying, dogs barking, headphones, cell phones, and in-flight magazines. For you to be as effective as possible, we must utilize the three tenets of presenting if we want our message to have clarity and understanding. In order to become more effective presenters and conveyors of information, we must understand and employ the central tenets of presenting. If we look at public speaking, or presenting as a house, there are three pillars that are the crux of the foundation. We must be adept at our content, organization, and delivery. I am not the safety subject matter expert. You are. You understand the content that must be relayed. In our surveys, many of you said that the content of presentations was not the problem. Those presenting the safety message to you do so in a manner that you understand and then can present that information to others. A strong grasp of content is crucial for an effective presentation, and thankfully you have indicated a clear understanding of your content. For purpose of presentation, please think through your primary messages again and decipher the main and most important content. What do others need to know? What is non-negotiable? What is a negotiable truth? And what need not be in the presentation at all? You must understand how all of the information connects and builds upon each other. Just like building a human pyramid, there is a firm foundation, and the other pieces contribute to the overall structure. Please take 1 minute and write down your regular message content. How we structure messages, articulate our main points, and decipher what our audience cares about is of the utmost importance, especially when communicating messages about safety. Think again about your primary audience. Who are they? What do they care about? Employees, clients, supervisors will all want something different from your communication with them. Employees may want to know what will help them advance in the company, how to speak to clients, or specific details. Your employees are accountable to you and other supervisors. If you have not communicated clearly with them, they will not communicate clearly with others. Supervisors may be looking for ways to solve a problem, summary statements, or problem-solving visions. They may not be interested in as many details, but seek a clear, summative articulation of what is really going on. Clients, however, could be looking for numerous things from you. Safety principles, clear understanding, time frame for problems and solutions, assurance, etc. Your client need will vary depending on the situation and the context. As you think through the organization of your messages, you must know who is your primary audience and what they care about. Another way to say this is what must they know as a result of your presentation. Please take 1 minute to answer those questions now. Repetition of messages, especially those messages that are based upon a safety process or information that impacts health, can usually be heavily repetitive, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. On the current slide, you see 3 phrases. Tell me what you are going to tell me. Tell me what you told me. Deciphering what information we need to articulate is important, but it needs to have a clear organizational structure. We need to understand our direction. Where are we heading, and why does this matter? Can you craft a roadmap? A simple public speaking outline consists of an introduction, main points, subpoints, and a conclusion. I recognize that here we may not be focusing on a pure public speaking outline, but the general premise is the same. If you can pinpoint 2 to 3 of the most important points for your audience and talk about why or how under the subpoints, your message will have a clearer structure. There must be a unifying theme throughout. Your employees, supervisors, and clients must walk away with the big picture. But you can help them by figuring out the important elements underneath that large umbrella and relating it back to them. Establishing an agenda at the beginning of your presentation, using clear transitional phrases like, we have just discussed blank, next we will talk about this, and how it relates to our big picture, can create a clearer sense of understanding for your audience. Create a roadmap. Tell me what you are going to tell me. Why is it important, relevant, etc. Tell me, and then summarize, conclude. Tell me what you have told me. A poorly structured and organized message can ruin any presentation, but so can poor delivery. When we speak about delivery, what I basically mean is how we present the message. Your attire, credibility, voice, body can all lend to more effective delivery or distract us from your core message. Think back to your favorite speakers or those who you believe are effective communicators. What do they do to deliver their messages clearly? Take 1 minute and think about good speaking examples. What do they do well? If you are like me, you have probably thought that speakers who are effective communicators utilize 4 categories exceptionally well: eye contact, gestures, movement, and voice. These 4 categories will guide the remainder of our delivery discussion. Eyes are the window to the soul. Numerous barriers can be broken down just by looking at someone, not in a freakish stare, but a conversational and somewhat vulnerable way. When presenting, you should be looking at your audience between 70 to 80% of the time. That percentage increases when you are speaking without a manuscript. Your audience must know that you are seeking engagement with them, and eye contact shows them that you want to relate. Gestures, our hands, and body movement are important, and while they are distinct because of the nature of the body parts that you use, they still come under the same big picture. How do you use your body when you present? Distracting gestures can include putting our hands in our pockets, playing with pens and note cards, tapping on a desk, etc. There are numerous ways to distract us with your mannerisms. My best advice for gestures is to make them natural. Using our gestures to reinforce our spoken message is important. We can also use the rest of our body to foster clearer understanding and engagement as well. One who paces, is slouched over, or shifts their weight from leg to leg can be a distraction to our overall understanding. Proper body movement is interestingly methodical. Be purposeful in how you move throughout the crowd. Have a firm foundational posture and limit excessive movements. A relaxed body will present most effectively. Our survey indicated voice seems to be our most pressing delivery miscue. Many of you mentioned specifically that you struggle with articulation and dialect. I am from the heart of Appalachia, or Appalachia. I understand the dialect pronunciation articulation concern. You may not be able to tell when your pronunciation is incorrect. For years, my grandmother would say orange or Washington, D.C. Until I started hearing it pronounced correctly, I never knew that this was a problem. As you seek clear pronunciation, there are computer programs or internet searches that will help. You can type in a word, hear the correct or proper pronunciation, and then repeat until you have come to articulate the word to your satisfaction. Doing this for dialect may help as well. With that being said, despite the fact that many of you indicated that you struggle with dialect, it may not be a hindrance. It all depends on the context and your primary audience. Our voice can also be improved by minimizing verbal pauses. All right? My verbal pause is okay, as in, I will ask a rhetorical okay once I make a point. I do a soft okay, or even sometimes a right or an all right, if I'm trying to ask my audience if they understand. The problem is that it can become repetitive and a crutch. Volume and pitch are also important. Some of you struggle with monotone voices. Changing how loud or soft you present certain principles will create a more fluid and entertaining presentation. Your voice almost always sounds louder to you than it does to others. If you are presenting in a large group, make sure those in the back of the room hear you properly. If you are presenting in a one-on-one session, make sure that your tone is formally conversational. Our rate, how many words we speak per minute, and inflection, emphasis we place on certain words or syllables, will aid us as well. These delivery tactics, with practice, will help you communicate your material clearly and with purpose. We have discussed much today, but remember these key principles. We are not just transferring information. We seek message transfer, yes, and clear understanding, but there are always human factors that can detract from the message. You have a great responsibility to present safety information clearly and with purpose. Who is your primary audience, and what is your primary message? Do not be like Weaver and Shannon and assume that communication is linear. It isn't. It is a process of give and take, presentation, and feedback. You are the source, but you must view your audience as more than just a receiver. They have a vested interest in your material. Remember our 3 tenets of public speaking and presenting: content organization, and delivery. Master these, master the message. Some of you wrote messages in your survey about the fact that it is too late for you to be taught how to communicate effectively. I promise it is not. It is not too late to more clearly understand safety content, mediums, methods, and procedures. It is not too late to organize your thoughts logically, with purpose, and practically, striving to present information clearly and succinctly. And it is not too late to look at your audience, to engage with them, like you would want one who is presenting to you to engage with you. It is not too late to utilize your body, your movements, gestures, and voice in a way that enhances your message, not detracts from it. It is not too late.